Oh, hello. You again. Well, welcome back to the Common Sense Tavern. We're going to be talking about exactly the sort of subjects you talk about with your mates over a pint of beer when you feel that nobody's intruding, that Starmer's not snooping, that the plods aren't going to come and arrest you at your front door for saying things that are politically incorrect. Today's episode is going to be all about that rubbish deal. It's not even a deal with the EU, it is a total sellout. The travesty of that poor political prisoner, Lucy Connolly, having her appeal rejected when she shouldn't be in prison in the first place, and all of the reform drama, because I'm going to be joined by someone who's a UKIP veteran, helped set up the Brexit Party, worked for Reform UK, knows all the characters involved, and is probably one of the nation's leading experts in the evil machinations of the EU. It's Mr. Gawain Towler. Gawain, welcome aboard. Glad to see you've got a good old-fashioned British ale. Cheers to you as well. Now, this isn't uncommon to us, is it? Sitting in a pub with beers, talking politics.
It's old peculiar, which sort of seems apt.
Which am I old and peculiar as well then? But you know, to give people a bit of background, we basically used to have our office set up like this. Gawain and I both worked at UKIP in sort of 2013, was peak era. Mm-hmm. And because our offices were actually in a European Union-owned building,
we could not do.
We weren't allowed to sit in there
for the reform.
Exactly,
UKIP in the day.
UKIP, we weren't allowed to sit in there, lest Olaf, the European Foreign Agency, tries to do us over, as they're trying to do with Marine Le Pen at the moment.
As I was once told, you can't have politics in the European Parliament.
Oh, exactly. God, that'd be the worst idea, wouldn't it? But so we relocated to the famous MOG, the Marquis of Granby in Westminster, and basically used to sit with our laptops at a table. Journalists would come in and out. Yep. We'd be phoning newspapers, getting stories out,
and
getting
not
lines.
Anything really.
No, we never drank. No, never touched a sip.
Rarely.
Absolutely not.
Yes. No, it was an interesting time.
It was a mad time, wasn't it? Because that was the era, 2013, where we were pushing so hard on Cameron just having that referendum. And I remember one of my first few weeks in the job was when he'd come back from Brussels with his list of concessions, which amounted to basically nothing.
Not so much as a matter of possible.
Because the EU doesn't do deals at the end of the day.
Do you remember that was he gave the famous Bloomberg speech?
Yeah.
And he shifted it by 3 days. But on the morning of the speech, which was annoying because we'd invited the lobby to watch Farage watch the speech.
Yeah.
And I had bought in something like 80 bacon sandwiches. And then the event was cancelled.
And did you eat them all?
These sandwiches all turned up. I got through some of them.
Oh, well, shame.
I started handing them out to the security guards at the European Commission building and people walking past in the street. What do you do with 80 bacon sarnies? Paper the wall.
History should have told us back then, or people like us, we knew, that the European Union simply doesn't do deals. They always talk about no cherry picking. We've seen this for years now, that any little freedom that the UK managed to carve out comes at such a great cost.
And it doesn't give, it is inexorable. It doesn't give up. I remember when there was the referendum in France.
On the Lisbon Treaty.
On the Lisbon Treaty.
When was that, 2014?
Something like that. And we were downstairs in the European Parliament with Farage. And one of the great poobahs of the European construction, a guy called Joe Leinen, a German Conservative MEP, came up to Nigel. We were cracked open some champagne. It was a great day. And he came up and said, "You have your little victory now. We have 1,000 ways to win." And it sort of the bubbles went flat in the glass.
But then it feels the same, doesn't it,
that's
today?
Exactly what's happening this week.
Exactly. So let's talk about, I mean, look, I think the word deal is a massive misnomer, because as far as I can tell, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if I was going to, do a little potted summary of Starmer's so-called deal, the EU's realised they need to rearm. They've given weapons to Ukraine. They've not built up their defence for years. We know this. America's sick and tired of having to babysit them.
Particularly the Eastern European countries.
Oh, they're solid.
They have been building up their percentages. They've been actually spending. But there again, if you're if you're bordering the bear,
If
you need to.
if you've once been taken over by the bear before, you've got some skin in the game. But then, so Europe needs weapons and came to Britain and said, hey up, you make pretty good weapons, don't you? Because we all know we've got some of the best arms in the world. And said, do you want to sell us some weapons? Oh yeah, that would be a great idea. What a great take home to the British people. Okay, well, we'll give you the ability to tender for 30%. But you've got to pay to do it. Oh, and meanwhile, you've got to give us access to your fish for even longer. Oh, and you've also got to accept the Youth Mobility Programme, which has now changed its name to what, like the Young People Energy Scheme or some craziness.
Can't use the word movement.
Can't use the word movement. They can't even use mobility anymore because it's now, what's it called? The energising, the youth, I don't know.
I didn't even cross my mind.
And then what I read in the papers was that Starmer had said, he said, right, fine, we'll extend it for 4 years. And the EU said, no, 5, we want 5. Now, normally it's a year-on-year basis, these negotiations.
Well, they're supposed to.
We want 5, no, 4, we want 5. Okay, then, you get 12.
Right.
I mean, what is that?
The Pharaohs get year-on-year negotiations. The Pharaohs. And if the UK doesn't have the capacity to negotiate on a year-on-year basis with the European Union, the suggestion is that to do it every year is going to be really hard work. The Faroe Islands, there's 13 of them. They're all carved out of whale
With
bone.
like 12 people sitting there, yeah. Exactly.
And a couple of polar bears in Svalbard. It was ridiculous situation. So it is absurd. Now, to be fair, that deal should have been a 4-year transition and stop.
Yeah.
And the Tories left it open, said they can renegotiate after 4 years. There was no need. It was reasonable. I didn't like it, but it was reasonable to say these fishermen have built, the Dutch, the French, the Spanish had built their businesses based on fishing in our waters. And so a little bit of transition to allow them to refocus their efforts over that 4-year period would have been reasonable because we're decent.
Yeah.
As a nation, we're good people in this sense. But by Boris leaving the renegotiating 4 years, that left the door open for this wholesale. There are 68, I think there are 68 constituencies that Labour hold that are coastal constituencies.
Blimey.
They've lost the Red Wall, they've lost the farmers. This is the Red Sea Wall. And there will be a breach of the Red Sea Wall. And it started already, of course, with Boston and Skegness, with Great Yarmouth, with Clacton. These are the areas that were already strong. And I think Fleetwood and places like that, up and down the country, Hull, Grimsby, Bridlington.
I'd imagine
Whitby,
they will hurt them in Scotland as well.
It will hurt them in Scotland.
But, I mean, the other thing that is just excruciatingly embarrassing over all of this is this sort of flimsy, mealy-mouthed suggestion that he says, well, maybe we might let your tourists use e-passport gates. We've let them use e-passport gates from the beginning because, like you said, we're reasonable people. And also, it's in the best interest of EU nations to allow Brits to do that.
This was a great claim. The Labour Party putting out pictures of people swimming on beaches and swimming in beautiful waters. Greece, Cyprus, Italy, Portugal, Spain have all allowed this.
Because
Why?
otherwise it clogs up their arrivals lounge because they need all these
British
staff on
tourists
gates.
to fund their lifestyles.
And also, surely it helps with their own security if you have that digital access.
So basically, Starmer says, we can do this now, you can have use of the e-passport gates. Well, he can't, because it's not an EU competence. That's decided by nation states, as many nation states have already decided to do because it's in their interest.
Exactly.
And the countries that didn't, did it out of a punishment.
Yeah.
Now, if they behave like they do, such as that, why do you want to have negotiations and be best friends with somebody who treats you so badly? It's Stockholm syndrome. It's like a abused woman.
Yeah.
Sadly, we keep on going back. We keep on going back. And if you think how the French behaved during COVID, and they're threatening to cut off power to the Channel Islands.
Well,
are we supposed to do a decent deal with these people?
Imagine, how the EU behaved during COVID when they had completely ballsed up their own vaccine procurement and was starting to
They were threatening to basically steal our stuff.
Break into warehouses, nick consignments, sent in like troops.
As one of your former colleagues, my former colleagues pointed out, Starmer goes on about stopping the boats. We didn't realise it was fishing boats.
No, right.
And sadly, the problem with the 12-year thing is that all the older people, the older generation who are in fishing now, they've had a really tough time. 12 more years of this, the younger generation won't get in.
No.
So 12 years is it. It's over. because you need to invest in new boats. They cost millions. For a 25-year-old guy who's done his apprenticeship on board his father's boat or his uncle's boat, to go to the bank and say, give me 8 million to buy a new trawler.
Yeah. To fish for fish, I'm not allowed to fish because we're giving it to the EU.
It's not going to happen.
It's crazy.
So in 12 years' time, there will be virtually no serious fishermen
And we have the richest seas in Europe because we were good at managing them. We didn't deplete our stocks. We enabled them to be
after we were
built
able to
up.
pull out of the CFP, we were able to rebuild the stocks. Because the CFP has been an environmental,
Disaster.
economic disaster for decades.
Well, let's talk about agriculture as well, because, you know, some people might say, well, this is great. There's now going to be frictionless trade when it comes to meat and vegetables with France. I mean, we're largely an importer. But at the same time, it's the fact that this is dynamic alignment, which means that we have to follow whatever wacky legislation they come up with in Brussels, and by gum are they good at doing that. Part of their sort of capitalist cartel. Let's make it impossible for anyone to challenge their market.
Food exports to the EU. It is true, if you look at the ONS statistics, our food exports to the EU have dropped. But there's one of the reasons for this, one of the significant reasons for this, is they also changed the statistics. And up until then, things like oranges, bananas, mangoes, fruit, tropical fruit, was imported because of our historical ties to the Commonwealth, was imported to Britain and then exported from Britain to the EU.
Right.
Under the new statistics, that is not a British export because they did not grow here.
Right.
We still export them, but it doesn't come under the agricultural products exports. So in fact, it's honest. It's more honest because these aren't British products.
But how is this going to affect future trade deals? It's
So
interesting.
the drop in exports in agricultural products to the EU is far less than it looks like because they've changed the statistics. So I think it's 25% drop, but actually it's not.
Now, I can get on board when you do a trade deal and the country says, right, if we're going to import these goods from you, we want to make sure it abides by our standards and our safety regulations. Fine. If you want to be selling eggs to wherever it may be, and they said, we need your eggs to be like this, that, and the other, and we don't like these supplements, great. But it's not just about the produce going to the EU. This is impacting the entire industry wherever it goes, which will then have a huge impact on how we do deals with other countries.
Well, this is the problem with dynamic alignment.
Yeah.
Because if you're doing a deal with, say, America, and you say, right, these are our rules, and we will keep you posted if we have any small changes in our rules, and you do your deal. We can't do that because we don't know how they're going to change the rules, and we can't impact on how they change the rules.
Yeah.
So by signing the dynamic alignment agreement and agreeing to follow their rules wherever they take them, that means our deals with other countries are almost impossible to sign because we can't give them confidence.
Now, do you think that's part of the EU's thinking? Because we had the sort of, it wasn't a trade deal with America. Yes, it involved trade and was a conversation around trade. It was essentially a negotiation with Trump, so he'd climbed back a little bit on the tariffs. We're still in a worse situation than we were. But it was a precursor perhaps to a bigger arrangement. In jumps the EU, messes it right up, and I'm pretty sure on purpose, because the EU has a real beef with America. It sees America as this threatening, competing trade bloc. It's very anti-Atlanticist, whereas we've always held this brilliant position as being the bridge between the two.
Correct.
And they've scuppered that now.
Well, they would like to, and they would like to more. But the whole series of these things we see in these announcements that were made on Monday, and obviously the fine print is where the devil is always in those details, and I haven't studied every single aspect of the fine print. I'm not going to pretend I have. But it already seems to be unravelling as people with bigger brains than mine start picking in through every line of what this deal is, and things aren't as they seem. They're not as they sold. We are being. What you've seen is this government overselling, making big. The ETS thing, the passport gates is a classic case. We've done this. Actually, you haven't.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It's a lie.
It's
wrong.
Embarrassing.
But possibly the most important of all of these little tinkers that they've produced is the carbon trading and aligning to the European energy
that is
rules.
so dangerous.
Well, apart from anything else, it's more expensive than ours. And dare I say, and we'll be talking about it later, I hope, dare I say, our energy prices are the biggest problem we face.
Yeah.
And to basically sign up to something that's going to make them worse, given what the government's been saying about bringing price costs down, it's hard to consider it other than mad.
Starmer's managed to do this within his first year, right? And the EU moves at a glacial pace unless it wants to move quickly, and then it will go fast and break things. And I wonder what's now going to transpire over the next 4 years. I think we're going to end up getting more and more and more into Brussels until the point that come the next general election, we've got to basically face the whole thing again. But this time it's not going to be as simple as saying a referendum.
Did you see, and when they announced this stuff over the weekend on Monday, Number 10 was putting out sort of, people are bored of the Brexit arguments. Let's not go back to arguing about it. Let's not go back to those arguments. Let's not talk about... I mean, what we've just done is unpick Brexit, but you lot shut up because nobody's interested. So we've had stability. Starmer has created instability, and then he said, you're not allowed to talk about it.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a culture thing, culture wars. For 30, 40 years, they've been destroying our culture and who we are, and then as soon as somebody stands up and says, oi, what are you doing? What happens? You're a culture warrior. You're dreadful people. How dare you fight back? And he's got the same attitude. We've changed it, but shut up, you lot. How dare you kick back? And that is the attitude. It's the arrogance of it.
Now, Gawain, I want to ask you about something else, which to say exercises me is a bit of an understatement. And that is the appeal case of Lucy Connolly, a woman who, in my mind, there's no way she should be in prison for writing, yes, it might have been tasteless and horrible, but writing a social media post that a few hours later she deletes, knowing she did it out of stress and anguish, as most people have done at times in the past. They're on social media and they're hurt and they go bam, 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 firing out a comment. I mean, that happens everywhere, all the time on social media. She then deleted it, and the next few days she was basically saying this rioting's awful, people shouldn't be going out and rioting. Now, I think that woman, when she was made an example of, because that's what it was, she was being made an example of, she was dragged into a police cell, which would have been enough to scare the living daylights out of her ever touching a keyboard again, quite frankly. Then she was given this ludicrously long sentence of 31 months.
Very badly advised by the solicitor.
Right. She was told by the CPS plead guilty. If that had gone to a trial, I don't think there's any way, shape or form they could have proven any kind of causal relationship between what she wrote on social media and what later transpired. I don't think she'd even be in prison. And that alone...
She certainly wouldn't be in prison still.
So what went on in this appeal hearing? Because surely to me, that when I looked at her defence, and well done the Free Speech Union, rising to the challenges they always do, that is what they were laying out. How on earth did they then go, no, we're going to still shut that down? And the woman's not even allowed visitation rights. You see people who are supposed to be deported because they're rapists going to appeal after appeal after appeal until they're allowed to stay. And this woman, who shouldn't be in prison in the first place, isn't allowed to visit her kids. What are they doing?
She's obviously a threat to general society. That's why they had to keep her inside.
Because they've made her so.
But she's not.
Well, no, she isn't, but they've made her so. They've created this example, and in a way it's going to be a headache for her, for them, when she does come out, and she might be allowed to do TV interviews, and we realise how much of a decent and, solid person she is.
The whole thing, you've got to remember the environment when it happened, when she was arrested and charged. You have the Prime Minister saying they're far-right thugs. So therefore, the chance of having a fair trial in that environment was almost nil, because he had prejudiced the trial. The government had prejudiced the trial.
The man who used to be basically the head of the CPS, the man who...
Literally, by describing everybody involved as a far-right thug, prejudiced all those trials. And they were shoveled through at high speed. They were given poor advice by CPS lawyers.
I reckon deliberately so. There must have been a line to the CPS saying, make them all plead guilty.
I wonder what the CPS...
Because we want to televise them. Because that's the other thing. I mean, most people wait years and years for a court case. All of a sudden, bam, 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 they're all happening. They're all being filmed. They're all being pumped out on television.
By the electorate, the political class in London.
It was sick. It's the sort of behaviour you see mad tyrants do. This sort of behaviour to control a population, to strike fear into a population.
We're going to look down every Twitter feed and we're going to find you. That was the police. And
it's sick. And we Brits, I think, are far too trusting sometimes in this country. We think we live in a high trust society. We have faith in our institutions. We don't believe that this sort of evil can transpire. And as a result, we've sat there and basically allowed this to happen. There haven't been protests about what's happened to that poor, poor woman. It is sick. It is deranged. It is twisted. It is a mark on our nation. We should be, quite frankly, being discussed by the UN Human Rights lot about the fact that we've got political prisoners. I think it's an absolute abhorrence.
I can't but agree with you. And I think the whole way it has been done, and obviously Allison Pearson did an excellent exegesis of the case in the Telegraph. But after she herself had been chased down for hurty words, and the whole idea, I know, I am of that generation, but sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me.
Well, that's just true.
And that is how I was brought up. But to me, this whole thing is an anathema. Look, what she said was awful.
Right.
Let's not beat around the bush. What she wrote was awful. But the mitigating circumstances of the death of one of her own children, so she was talking about how the families of those children would feel. Yeah. And if that makes me a racist, so be it. I think it's how she finished it, or something like that. But that's how.
But also, she was a childminder to children from all sorts of backgrounds. There is no way, if this had been a proper, fair, sensible trial, which every Brit should be entitled to under the rules of this land, there is no way she'd be in prison.
It does not look like there's equality before the law. It's absolutely not.
It's scary. And I don't think we should ever water this down and be complacent about this.
Remember, when Starmer was prejudicing those trials by the government saying that they were all far-right thugs, he already knew the truth of what was going on.
I know.
He already knew.
He knew what the police had found in that house, and we're still being lied to today.
I know.
We're still being lied to. There are people who know what was inside that room.
About people like Lucy Connolly. He knew.
He knew.
And he still prejudiced their trials.
Yeah.
There is something dark, really dark about that.
Yeah.
And in a country that believes in freedom of speech, in a country that believes in the common law, in a country that believes that the state is your servant, not that you are a servant of the state. This is absolutely, it strikes at the very core of who we are as a people.
Yeah.
And it is deeply, deeply concerning. There is no good side. There's nothing positive I can think about. And as I say, other people on the sort of, you can now be investigated for, I believe, for suggesting that there's two-tiered justice, because that's a conspiracy theory. Yeah.
But it's not a conspiracy theory. It's patently evident.
Precisely. But there have been people. One of the reasons, I mean, you saw that. It was actually quite funny. The old policeman who was.
The house was raided. I mean,
Brexity things.
Yeah. Oh, the Brexity bookshelf. But I mean, funny, but that poor man was absolutely harrowed by it, and again felt he had to go along with it, because this is the thing: people who know how to game the system, chancers and Romans who know how to game the system, sit there and know how to pull certain levers and press certain buttons. Innocent, law-abiding people, when police turn up on your doorstep, are terrified, and they say, "Yes, sir, please, sir, I'll do what you say," thinking it's going to help them, and it's laying a trap.
No, but those Brexit things are now questionable by the police.
Gosh,
this proves you're a wrong 'un, because you voted. You're one of the 17.4 million.
Gosh, well,
you're clearly a
what
wrong
does that make us?
Well, yes, sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Wait for the knock at the door.
The Lucy Connolly case is the little tip of the iceberg of something very, very concerning and deep within our society.
Yeah.
And honestly, we have to turn things around. If we do not,
this is the other thing.
What is left?
One person wrongly imprisoned as a political prisoner because she's being made an example of to try and...
Clearly. Pour encourage les autres.
Yes, exactly. That is one too many. And I look at it like this. The amount of noise the media made over Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe. Now, I'm not saying that, that woman deserves... A different ballgame, but... She had been a British citizen for less than a year, essentially, and had gone over to Iran. And yes, it was awful, but there was so much noise about that poor woman. She's in Iran. Isn't it terrible? We've got to let her out. The Iranian state are using her as a political pawn. And now it's Lucy Connolly. Oh, where is the media now? Where are they now saying this is
Some
wrong?
of the media have.
Oh, the right ones?
Some have.
Yeah.
But by and large, they haven't.
Yeah.
And there's a lot. I still see it. She deserved it. She deserves it because she's a wrong 'un, because she spoke the wrong thing. She had wrong thing.
Yeah.
And it is a little bit like the old "we're the masters now" attitude. They are in charge. They have a massive majority. They control the commanding heights of the establishment, the legal services, the judges, things of this sort. Many of these judges who are involved have got some very questionable decisions.
Yeah.
And make no bones about it, not only they're in charge, but they're flexing their muscles.
Yeah.
They are, and they continue to do so. We've got 4 more years of this.
I know.
4 more years.
I know. That's what I say. He's only been in power a year. What are the other 4 years going to look like?
Who knows? This may be used in evidence against you.
Yeah. Well, I'll be like Jeffrey Archer. I'll bang out some books if they send me to Clink. I don't think there's any way back now for Rupert into reform. Too much water under the bridge.
I don't think so. And if you're going around calling people vile and evil, it's quite hard to come back from that. I wrote a piece last week in the Standard about it. I've pretty much kept my counsel for the last few months over this, but I was asked to talk. And then after the police case was dropped, I was asked about it. Now, the police case to me is baffling. I just do not understand why a party that hates the concept of non-crime hate incidents, hates the concept of people being charged. That's what we were talking about with Lucy Connolly, about hurty words. Going to the police, as the party did, over 2 instances, I think, of unpleasant comments by Mr. Lowe, was wrong.
Yeah.
I don't know. But that being said, Rupert is a man of great talent. He is, and conviction and drive. However, politics is a team sport.
Yeah.
And personally, after his behaviour at a conference last year, where he just announced policies that weren't policies, he really upset a whole bunch of people. He behaved in what to my mind was just a very damaging way. He hadn't cleared it, and his attitude was, "I'm right, I don't care." Well, that's not good enough.
But
it's just not good enough. If you want, I thought. Now, this is me being naive. I thought, this is September, October, after I was fired. November. I thought that this was a danger. This was always going to be a danger, because Rupert has track record of doing stuff that goes completely against the interests of the party as a whole, and has been forgiven, and forgiven, and forgiven. I mean, there was a moment, spring last year, spring conference. Rupert's the second last person to speak. Richard Tyson's party leader. He's the final speaker. And Rupert, great speech, big cheers. Wouldn't it be great if Nigel came back as leader? Tyson's the next person to speak.
Yeah.
And he's undermining the party leader 5 minutes before Tyson goes up on stage. Well, what on earth are you playing at, mate? You might think it, but it's really not the sort of thing you say out loud.
But let's talk, because a lot of the inflection point in all of this seems to be people have this belief that Rupert actually knows the answers to mass migration, has very serious policies to really sort it out, and Nigel's gone soft.
Yeah, no.
Let's talk about that.
Now, I think Rupert has an effective battery of sound bites. He does ask many of the right questions, absolutely, and gets some very good and interesting, useful answers. But that's not a policy. That is information that can be welded together to create an effective policy. He has a great deal of fans on what I call reform adjacent, both at home and abroad. He has been, obviously, as we know, when Farage refused to say that Tommy Robinson was a political prisoner, Musk went, "Well, you're useless. I want somebody to say that, and I'm going to support Rupert." Now, of course, it would inflate any head. It would flatter any ego if the world's biggest figure online says that.
No, the world's richest man and arguably one of the most
says
powerful.
that about you. Well, you're going to feel good about yourself, aren't you?
Of course.
That is only human. I don't blame Rupert for feeling good about himself in those circumstances, because anybody would. I mean, shit, if Elon Musk said I was the most brilliant fellow in my field, I'd be chuffed. Of course I would. However, I go back. It is a team game.
Yeah.
And Rupert, I think, is constitutionally unable to be a team player. Now, there are things that could have been done to mitigate that. He could have been given work to do. The devil does make work for idle hands. He could have been given a job. Go away and draft and come up with an immigration policy, Rupert. Come back to us after doing the hard work, doing the hard graft, doing the miles, getting the information, doing the research. Come back to us with a reasoned, considered immigration policy to take forward to 2029. That would have been a useful thing. But the point is the bigger picture. the bigger cause is always more important than the individual. And that's broadly, if we want to change the country, if we want to address this fear we have of 4 more years of Starmer and what happens if he wins again, we really don't have much option here. If we want to win, we have to win. We have to win at the earliest opportunity.
Yes.
Because if we let this continue, we have let down not only ourselves and our generation, but the generations to come. And we're letting down, I believe, the generations that have passed. In politics, you do not hold a country freehold. It is leasehold. It is not yours. You inhabit it, and you respect it, and you look after it, both for those who have come before us, who built the society, built the structures, built the education system, built the common law, created our language, created our culture, but also to those who have come after us, that we can hand on a nation that is healthy and happy and vibrant and going forward. And that is our duty. We have an opportunity over the next 4 years to change the world, to make this country a happier and better place. If we fluff it, future generations will rightly despise us.